Welcome to Plants vs. Meat, the podcast where we put the health, environment, and animal rights debates on the chopping block. Real Men Eat Plants is proud to provide time to dig deep into the meaty issues that divide us, as we pit a carnivore against a plant-baser in a no-holds-barred battle for the truth. Get ready to hear some passionate arguments, mind-blowing facts, and maybe even a few jokes, as we explore ways to save the planet, improve our health, and save some animals along the way. So, whether you're a plant-based warrior or a meat-eating machine, tune in to Plants vs. Meat and find out which side you're really on.
Hey everybody, welcome to Plants vs. Meat, the platform for friendly and informative debates between herbivores and carnivores that will give us both a chance to explore their perspectives and their chosen lifestyles. I'm your host, Brian, and joining us today is Wade Van Orman, who leads a local indie rock band, Moon Buggy, and works at a food cooperative, Bloomingfoods Market and Deli. Wade has experimented with a lot of different diets throughout his years, including vegetarian, raw vegan, before settling in on his omnivore diet. And welcome to the show, Wade. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate that.
Just to help set the context for people listening and stuff, is you grew up in Chicago. I lived in Chicago for a little while, way back when. So that's like the meat packing capital of the world. So tell us about growing up in Chicagoland.
Yeah, well, the Midwest is definitely a home of meat and potatoes. And,
Yep.
of course, I had a lot of that because my parents enjoyed it. And, sometimes I look back and think, how did I survive my childhood with all the... Because I came of age, when, things were becoming boxed, like instant potatoes and TV dinners and those types of things. But I also had a father that was maybe a little more adventurous. And as I mentioned earlier with you, he would go to little grocery stores in Chicago and buy different exotic foods for us to sample. Mm-hmm. So I had a kind of a wide array of culinary delicacies at my behest when I was young. And I think that was good because generally in the Midwest, it is meat and potatoes. But I think I was branching out at an early age, trying different foods. So that was kind of interesting.
And it's so true because I think I'm 46. I kind of grew up in that same era of Hungry Man dinners.
Oh yeah, you remember?
Yeah,
Dinty Moore beef stew and those types of things.
So I'm right there with you, my friend. And I do remember my grandfather giving me a chocolate-covered grasshopper at one point in my life, and me trying it and saying, I like the chocolate part, but the grasshopper was too crunchy on that stuff. This had to be 40. Well, maybe not 40, but 35 years ago or something, a long time ago. So,
oh yeah. For me, it's like in the 70s, and I had chocolate-covered grasshoppers. They looked like grasshoppers dipped in chocolate.
Yeah, which, exactly.
Was pretty exotic for a 10-year-old kid, let alone someone who was an adult. But it was a good experience to have that.
Good source of protein, but you still have to feed them quite a bit too. So
yeah, well, we're moving in the direction of insects as our main meal, I think.
That's right. Well, it's interesting. So I wanted to kind of unpack the health side of it a little bit with you. So walk us through. You've tried a few of these diets, and what have you sort of found that works best for you, and why, and pros and cons of the ones that you've had to experiment with?
Well, sure. I mean, I think it was probably in college or after that I really started eating well, and experimenting with more vegetarian diet, which I did for a number of years. And I found that I was feeling better as a result. Generally had more energy. I felt more alert. And then when I was living down in Tennessee, I had the opportunity to go raw vegan, which I recommend, for anyone interested in it. It's not the easiest diet to keep up, and a lot of it depends on availability. I was living in the South, so we had things more year-round than, in the North, for example, as far as farmers markets.
Right.
But I was doing maybe 75, 80% raw vegan at that time.
Right.
And I did that for about a year or so. But I felt like I was kind of missing something in the diet. It is a bit more extreme, I think, for some people, even though I recommend experimenting with it. It may not be for you, but I found that it felt good for about a year or so. And then I remember eating my first taste of meat, and I felt like I was getting the whatever vitamins I was missing from the raw vegan diet
Right.
within that meal that I had kind of ended the diet with. And I think it was after that I realized that maybe being an omnivore was best for me, not eating as much meat, but certainly not saying no as well to
Yeah.
that diet. So I think that that's where my comfort zone is now, is as
Yeah.
an omnivore.
I do think like you hit on the right topic in the sense that if you're going to embark on more of those stringent diets, that you have to make sure you're more conscious of the nutritional value in the foods, and that
Yes,
the body does need the B12 and some of those
definitely.
other things. Like I think the I think that the protein myth is still very rampant throughout America, and
Yes.
so I feel like I hope people all know that are listening that you can get your protein from anywhere. That's not the issue. We get too much protein in our diets. It's the fiber for sure.
Oh yeah.
Um, and it's definitely like some of those, the B12 or some of those omega 3s or something like that. So you do have to be conscious of which foods have certain things in that. Do you think when
Right.
you were doing that more raw vegan diet, you were conscious of those kinds of things or not really?
Well, I think I would have continued it had I had someone kind of coaching me along with it,
Yeah.
because it
Yeah.
is a more radical diet and not everybody can sustain it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if I had someone that was kind of at my side saying, why don't you add a little more of this or a little more of that to your diet, I may well have continued with it. Um, but also growing up in the Midwest, I suppose I have a taste or predilection toward certain foods like meat-based foods.
Right.
And that's more of a cultural thing than anything. It's
Mm-hmm.
like it's what you're used to, what your taste buds are used to.
Yes.
So there was a period where I just started missing certain things. Even just a simple hamburger, I suppose, was kind of exotic. After getting off that diet. But yeah, I think anyone that's wanting to embark on some more of a intense diet,
Hmm.
like a raw vegan, would
Yeah.
probably be best advised by people that know,
Hmm.
what nutrients to include.
And it's an interesting thing because I know I definitely offended my mother the other day because I love potato salad and I
Oh
love
yeah,
my mom's potato salad, but she always forgets that I'm like in the vegan category, and I was vegetarian for many years, and so she could still throw the eggs or the mayo in it, and now I say, well, Mom, you put the eggs in it, so I'm not going to eat your potato salad. And she goes, but I made a double batch. You're not going to
yeah,
eat a little bit of
right.
that?
Well,
And so.
a lot of people during that time when I was raw vegan would invite me over. We'd get together maybe at their place, and they'd be like tiptoeing around this diet issue. Is it
Yeah.
okay if I have such a? And I said, listen, I'm a guest. I will eat whatever you present because I think it's rude to do otherwise.
Right, right, right. Yeah.
And I don't mind breaking with whatever the diet is at the time when I am a guest at somebody's home, because it's important to
Hmm.
share a meal, I think, equally with people that are bringing you into their home. Um, but you also touched on something that's interesting, because now more than ever the vegan options are astounding.
Yes.
I work
Yes.
at a food cooperative in Bloomington, and I
Hmm.
see like just the increase in vegan mayo over the past few years. It's just
Yes.
phenomenal. So this is
Hooray!
never, yeah, I know. Here we are. There's never been a better time, I think, to be vegan.
Yeah.
And,
I
and
I
above
agree.
all, my feeling is experiment with these things.
Hmm.
Experiment with diets. I think we live in a blessed capacity in the United States where we've got options food wise that
Hmm.
people in other places don't.
Yeah.
So by all means, if someone feels the urge to do vegan or raw vegan, they've got the wherewithal, they've got the options now that we didn't when we were kids.
Yeah. So, Mom, if you're listening, get some of that vegan mayo, and I'm going to eat some of your potatoes. I guess I take the opposite stance of like I don't want to offend people at their table, so
Yeah.
I sat there and ate the watermelon, and then I went and said, Mom, I'm going to make myself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or something
Right.
like that, kind
Right.
of a
Right.
thing. Um, just to stick to my core principles of it. But at the same time, I know it's my mom, and she'll be slightly offended no matter what I do in some fashion or
Yeah.
another, right?
Right.
But I love her, and she tries the best. I guess what do you sort of how did you feel about um, the health side of it when you were doing the raw vegan or vegetarian or your current diet now? Like, what would you say?
I think that my diet now is probably more balanced than it was when I was raw vegan, you know. And like I said, if I had some more coaching or someone that kind of was suggesting different types of things to include in the diet, I may have continued with it. I guess I just settled on an omnivore diet because there's less thinking involved in meal prep or meal planning, where, you know, I don't have to think, oh, I ran out of such and such,
Right.
you know, I've got to go grab it or whatever. So it's just easier. And I feel like I'm also just getting more dense nutrient, you know, types of foods that comes with an omnivore diet. Just by default, because you're adding different things into the diet rather than just specific things that you're taking out.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a cross section of nutrients that I feel like I'm getting now, which, you know, is good. But I also felt pretty good as a vegetarian for a number of years too. So there may come a point where I go back to that, you know.
Well, I know Glenn Merzer introduced us, so thank you, Glenn, for hooking
Glenn.
us up to say hi. So you're saying if I can get Glenn to rally with you, you'll come back to the vegan side with me with his guidance and stuff. So
you drive
Glenn,
a hard bargain.
help Wade out here. No, it's interesting because you bring up a good point, but like what I find in the standard American diet is the butter and the dairy is everywhere. Like, it's on our rolls, it's in our cookies, it's just everywhere. Or for that matter, like I know the Italian cookies that I grew up on with the sprinkles and stuff. Like the sprinkles just have so many chemicals and crazy crap in them. So like you really have to be aware of what you're putting in your body on that front. So I know if you're it's definitely 10 times easier to not say, hey, I'm vegan and I'm not going to eat that, because you just go with the flow on that front. But I guess, are you concerned about what you are eating and some of the chemicals or some of the things that are like clearly known to cause cancer, and you're putting those in your body as part of some of the stuff that you eat?
Well, I think by default, working at a food cooperative where our meat is locally sourced and we know where it's coming from, and when I'm eating that, you know, I feel pretty confident that I'm getting the right, you know, quality food. Now, when you go out to a restaurant, it's trickier, obviously.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that that's really where people need to think about those types of decisions. You know, should I eat this chicken? Should I eat this meat at a restaurant if I don't know where it's sourced from? Yeah, because I think that's important, and we're becoming more aware of that. I think
we are
now in this country with all the options that we have from food choice. So I think that's important for people to realize that you know, it's important to know where you're getting your meat from.
That's right.
And as far as the chemicals, that's part of that too. But I think again, that's more of like when you're eating out, there's just things you're not aware of. You know, you can control the quality of your food at home. You know, you know where things are sourced from. You know what the ingredients are, and I encourage people to do more cooking at home as a result of that.
Right.
But you know, I remember 20 some years ago when Bill Moyers did a blood test, and he was shocked at all the different chemicals floating around, and that was 20 plus years ago. I can only imagine what we're carrying around now, you know, just by default of living in this country, you know, and having chemicals pretty much all over, which, you know, in a way are unavoidable.
Yeah.
We don't live in.
All right, if you've ever wanted to show off your plant-based lifestyle and do it in style, here's your chance. We have some of the most amazing t-shirts, hats, accessories, coffee mugs, and more at shop.realmeneatplants.com. We have statement t-shirts that will bring a smile to everyone's face. I love the I want tofu tonight tee. Plus, we have podcast tees, Real Women Eat Plants gear, Real Kids Eat Plants, and Real People Eat Plants, just in case men, women, and kids didn't cover it all. Yeah, we love you and love that you want to show off that healthy lifestyle of yours. Again, check out our high-quality gear at shop.realmeneatplants.com and enjoy.
still boggles my mind. Europe has more or less banned certain things, and we still haven't figured that out here in America.
Well, I think
But
a lot of their stuff is a lot more stringently
yeah,
oriented as far as the quality and the source. So
right.
you're right. I think we've got a ways to go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it raises a good point. So, like, I hope everybody gets out and votes this year, one side or
For
the
sure.
other, and then I hope
Yeah.
everybody votes with their wallet every chance they get. So,
Well, and you're doing that when you're buying food as well.
mhm.
With one thing I know about because I work at a cooperative is organic food and locally sourced food. You know, those are my two things that I really encourage people to investigate.
Yeah.
I think that local trumps organic. You know, when
Mhm.
you can get as much locally sourced, if you got a farmer's market that you can go to,
Yeah.
get it fresh from the vendor. But if you can't, you know, try to get as much organic as you can. And those prices have come down. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, well, I can't afford organic," but you can, you know, pick your battles. You know, look at the Dirty
That's right.
Dozen
Mhm.
online, and
Yep.
go from there. Because I think now more than ever, those options of availability are just increasing.
I love it. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the environment.
Yeah.
Because I think I commend your effort to work at the local food place like that, and that's what it's all about. Like we have
Yeah.
got to get back to our roots to a degree and say like, look, I can't have strawberries all year long. Strawberries are in season locally, one time during the year, maybe twice if you're lucky. So what is your thoughts on that sort of standard American diet and the omnivore diet and how it's contributing to climate change? Like, lay it out for us.
Well, yeah, it's a big nut to crack, isn't it? You know.
Hmm.
Well, I think that because our options are so limitless now, focus on what you can do. I
Right.
shop at the farmers market. I buy from local vendors. I buy
Hmm.
organic as much as possible. Don't be overwhelmed by the choices, but narrow
Yeah.
in on what you can get,
Hmm.
locally, what you can afford, and, what can feed your family.
Yeah.
Because now more than ever, we're kind of blessed to have all these options. But yeah, and also I think investigate what your diet contributes to the environment or doesn't.
Yeah.
You know, uh, it may not be realistic for someone to become vegan straight
Hmm.
away. They
Yes.
may have to kind of go through a process. I was vegetarian before I was vegan,
Hmm.
for a little while. And not everybody can make that leap quickly.
Yep.
But I think more options are available to people to investigate what's best for them.
That's right.
And so I think now we're living kind of in a golden age of, food, really. I mean, I've never seen so many people that are interested in veganism, for example,
Hmm.
as I have been in the past few years. It just seems
Yeah.
to have really taken off. So environmentally, I think that can only be beneficial,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and I think that's the direction we need to move in ultimately. Not necessarily everyone can do a vegan diet, but at
Hmm.
least be armed with the knowledge to
Right.
make the right decisions about how your diet affects the environment.
Yeah, I guess, and it's interesting because I spoke with some people that are rolling out education programs into the local universities to get
Yeah.
I think it was veg default or something like that. Like, we just want you to, like, vegetables are first. That's the default choice. And then you add the meat on and it costs $3 extra. It's not subtracting the meat from the menu item or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So, like, we're going to see that societal shift. I agree with. I still think the vegan diet is one of the best ones out there, and it's more of just a lifestyle shift. But what do you think? Like the 300 million Americans, like how often should they be eating the meat to help us save the environment? And like, how do we, if we can't end animal agriculture, like how do we shift it to be a super small portion
Yeah.
that we can make our planet survive the next 100 years?
Well, you touched on one thing, which is, you go to a place, a restaurant, and, you want to add meat, it's going to be an extra whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's one place to start where it makes it seem more attractive to just stick with a vegetarian or / vegan diet
Hmm.
as opposed to adding the meat because of the cost involved. It gets to an important point, which is what is the cost
Yeah.
of meat?
Yeah.
And you're talking about what is it environmentally cost?
Yes.
And I think the more people understand what that is, the more they will kind of phase out that aspect perhaps on their own.
Right.
And maybe it's because I'm spoiled working at a food cooperative.
Yeah.
And I see more people experimenting with vegan diets because they have those options readily available. And we, kind of encourage it by, the operation that we have in a food co-op. So I would say, getting to your question, just phase it out weekly.
Yeah.
Go 1 week without meat.
Yeah.
And it's like, for example, I don't own a vehicle. I've never owned a vehicle in my whole life. And I tell people, do an experiment. Just don't drive for a week if you can do it.
Yeah.
If you work in a little place like I do, Bloomington, you don't necessarily need a car to commute. Some people just drive 3 blocks to go to the grocery store without even thinking about it.
That's right.
The point is that you want to be aware of what you're doing, because it's the awareness that creates the conditions to a healthier lifestyle.
Yes.
So I recommend just saying, okay, I'm not going to eat meat for a week. And I do that myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good place to start.
That's
it
right.
doesn't have to be a radical change. It can be just a gradual thing. I think we've gotten so enculturated about diet in this country, especially, that we don't even think about it. This is just what I eat. This is just my standard of living here,
Yeah.
And we don't really investigate, what are we doing? What are we putting into our food,
Oh,
So-
I agree. I know I was eating buffalo chicken sandwiches 3-4 times a week. You know what I mean? Like, I'm addicted to buffalo chicken sandwiches before I went vegan, and
They're tasty.
they are, but at the same time, like, my cholesterol has dropped. I've lost the weight and stuff, and now I have the buffalo cauliflower, or I have buffalo. I still love my buffalo sauce. Don't get me wrong, but but yeah. So you'll find that. Well, talk to us about the animals. Like, I find that most people that have adopted the plant-based lifestyle are doing it for one of those 3 reasons. That it's usually your health or the animals. It's very rarely the environment, but the animals is a big one. Like, what's your thoughts on the animal cruelty and ethical side of this?
Well, it's something that you should be aware of. Where's your food come from? How are if you eat meat, how are the animals treated? What are the conditions?
Right.
Again, working at a co-op, I have an advantage of knowing that we have locally sourced meats, for example, that a lot of us managers go to the farms themselves to see what the conditions are. So they know, and not everybody can do that, as a consumer. But that's why I think going to a farmer's market is important, because a lot of farmers markets sell meat, and that is locally, raised and humanely raised, hopefully. So they get to know what the background is on how the animals are treated.
Right.
But then there's some people that say, well, it doesn't matter how humanely you treat the animal; they're going to be slaughtered for your food,
That's right. Yeah.
And I don't have a response to that other than, well, God bless you for not eating meat. If that's important to you, then I encourage it. But not everybody can take that jump necessarily. That's why I say, stay off for a week and see how you feel. Don't eat meat for a week. But I think I have an advantage of working at a co-op, because I know where the local meat comes from. I've got a wonderful farmer's market not too far from me I can go to that has local meat as well. But I think more people are trying to be aware and conscious of where it's getting sourced from. And that's what I encourage people to investigate. Ask your local vendor or farmer, how is the meat raised? Is it organic feed? Are they free range? How is it operated? And I think that's important if you're going to continue with that diet.
I agree. Like, I do think we're probably not going to be able to get everybody to go vegan, but I do think either 2 things are going to happen in the next 100 years. The price of meat is going to be astronomical, so only the rich will be able to afford it, or we're going to figure out the right way to build the meat alternatives, I guess, so that
that's
people...
really hitting the market now too. With Beyond Burger, Impossible Meat. And even as you, I'm sure, aware, the lab-grown meat,
Right.
which is, interesting and supposed to be just as good as, a regular chicken that's raised in a coop
right.
or wherever.
Right.
So I mean, I think that that's a great idea, because then you're dealing with the environment in a much more gentle way too.
Yeah.
You've got lab-grown meat available.
I'm very on the fence with that one, because I think it's still going to take too many chemicals and industrial stuff to grow it that way, like with the waste products of humans and cows and everything. So I still struggle with that one. But I guess the debate that I have so I went vegan for the health and the environment, by far, right? Like I want to make sure that my great grandchildren have a planet to live on. But the more I speak with animal sanctuary owners or people that have gone vegan for the animals, the more I can identify with them. And it's that question around, like, if I was like 1000% starving and like on my last dying breath, I would probably still be able to kill the animal myself and then eat it if that was my only food source. But like if you said like, hey, that's your cow, go kill it and you can have the meat from it, I don't think I could do it. I just don't. I don't think I could actually kill the animal in any way, shape, or form, because I know I can go 4 or 5 days without food. I'm not hungry. I'm not hungry enough to do it. So when it comes to the actual killing piece, I don't think I could do it. And I think that's something that humans as a society pull the wool over our eyes over the actual act of killing the animal.
Well, if I was a Buddhist,
Yeah.
and if you read about the life of the Buddha, one of the conditions for eating meat was that it wasn't slaughtered on your behalf.
Right.
Which I thought was interesting. I mean, that's a real moral question to consider, and a very advanced question to consider. Where does the meat come from? And of course, there was also a point. There was a schism with the followers of Buddha, where this other monk said, well, I'm going to grab half of your entourage, half of your devotees, and we're just going to be vegetarian. We're just not going to eat meat. But they couldn't really survive that way, because they were begging for alms, right, every morning.
Yeah.
And whatever they had in the bowl, they had to eat. That was just the way that you did it as a monk.
Right.
And so that particular schism basically ended, because they couldn't live completely vegetarian. Like that. There was just no way, 2,000 years ago or whatever, that was going to be successful.
Yeah.
But,
really interesting.
But I thought it was interesting that, he said that if it's killed for you, don't eat it. That's not good. Bad karma.
Yeah.
But we're so divorced from our source now that it's interesting how, maybe we put all sorts of logical conundrums about how to.
That's right.
How do I get out of this? I love animals, but I'm eating animals.
Right.
And that's a difficult question for everyone to answer for themselves.
And it is that speciesism kind of thing, right? That we could never fathom killing or eating a cat or a dog, but a cow or a pig, no problem.
Well, so again, I think that's the culture that we grow up in.
Right.
I mentioned earlier about insects. That might be like the final frontier in protein and the future of food, because we see in parts of Southeast Asia that's a delicacy to eat insects.
For sure.
It doesn't cost a lot to harvest, and they do provide dense protein. So we just have to get over our kind of ugh factor with eating that type of thing. But that could be the next frontier.
Right. I agree. I mean, I definitely think that society will move in that direction as some of the other challenges to meat become apparent. But I still say, like, all of that is secondhand vegetables. That's the way I guess I look at it. It's secondhand beans, it's secondhand grain, because somebody else had to eat it and convert it before you get it. So yeah, I agree. This has been awesome, Wade, getting to chat with you and unpack this. I think we hit on a lot of really important topics, and I appreciate you being so open and willing to have this friendly conversation with me.
Definitely. It was my pleasure.
I really appreciate everybody listening. That is all the time we have for this episode of Plants vs. Meat. We need more guests like Wade and others to come on the show. So if you're interested in hanging out with me for a few minutes, please comment below on the post here and get in touch with us. You can check us out at Plants vs. Meat podcast, and we really appreciate you, Wade, sharing your insights and experiences with our community, and we'll talk soon.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Plants vs. Meat. We hope you enjoyed the debate and gained some new insights into the complex world of food choices. Remember, whether you choose plants or meat, the most important thing is to make informed decisions that work for you and the planet. Don't forget to tune in next time for more food for thought and more heated debates. Thanks for listening to Plants vs. Meat, brought to you by Real Men Eat Plants. Head over to Apple Podcast and give us a review and let us know what you think about this episode. Don't forget to tag us at Plant vs. Meat Podcast when you share this episode in your preferred social media. Do you think you have a good argument about eating meat? Be our guest and email us at pvm@realmeneatplants.com. We love hearing from our listeners. Thank you to our guests and to you, our listeners, for your support, and see you next time.